Kia ora koutou, and welcome to this video on the Kingdom of God. Now, I was busy praying the Lord's Prayer and came to the second sort of stanza or sentence of it that said, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." And I really wanted to explore what God's kingdom that we're talking about coming here would look like. And I'm a really visual person, so I use that word look like when I want to explore something. And you only have to go back to when Jesus was on this earth and have a look at how he acted and experienced things to see a little glimpse of what God's kingdom might look like on this earth. And it's almost a upside down, inside out sort of kingdom when you compare it to what we see today in society, what we've seen through history in society, and all the horrible things that people have done to each other in communities and around the world, be that in wars or in just day to day living. And so I was like, what's the best place to go to in the Bible to get a glimpse of what the kingdom of God is actually like? And I think the best place to go is to the Sermon on the Mount. And so I'm going to just take us there. And so let's just have a look. And Sermon on the Mount, the version that I'm going to go and have a look at is actually Matthew 5. And Jesus came to an area which was up a mountain. So that's why it's called the Sermon on the Mount. And he opened his mouth and he taught them. And this is the section of the Sermon on the Mount that's often called the Beatitudes. And it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And in the Beatitudes, it really has some things, everything that says blessed, um, blessed is the poor of spirit, those who mourn, who are meek, are things that often in our society we think about and we go, oh, they're downtrodden, they're not worthy, they must have done something wrong to be in that situation. And we come up with all these excuses as to what that looks like in our society and how it's bad. But I think if we dig into each one of those blessed statements, we see a lot of depth and a lot of perception change if you look at them in the way that Jesus was looking at them. And so you can say, "Blessed are the poor of spirit." Now, if you compare uh, the Pharisees, who considered themselves to be very spiritual people, or the Sadducees again, who thought themselves to be very spiritual people, and you go, okay, so if that was held up in society as being very spiritual people at the time that Jesus was on earth, what does poor of spirit look like? And it could have been that the poor of spirit were the ones that recognized that they didn't know everything about God, that they weren't good at keeping all the laws that the Torah required them to keep, or that the Pharisees required them to keep, that they acknowledged that they were never going to match up to what, I guess, God's expectation. They felt God's expectation was for them. And so you see here that really, and inside of that poor of spirit, there's a whole lot of other things that you could unpack. And I think if we start to recognize that we are poor of spirit, that we really don't understand who God is and um, how we should represent him on earth, I think then we come a little bit closer to seeing what the kingdom of God is all about. Because the kingdom of God is centered around God, and it is centered around his will that he wants done in this world. And I think if we recognize that we don't really know what that is and are spiritually hungry to find out what that is, I think that second sentence of the Lord's Prayer becomes a real heart cry to actually see God's kingdom come here on earth, and that we are willing to play our parts, even if we might not know what that part is at the moment, and we're wanting to become more deeply involved with God, to be able to understand and be able to live out what our part of helping God's kingdom come on earth might be. So, over the next few months, I'm just going to try and unpack some of my thoughts around uh, God's kingdom and what it could look like in this world. And I don't have all the answers, and I'm still exploring this, and I probably will explore the kingdom of God for ever and a day, because I want to be that person who's poor in spirit, who doesn't take pride in everything that they know and doesn't look down on people who are not at what I think is the same level, perhaps, of spiritual maturity as I am. I don't want to be the Pharisee of my day. I really want to be able to lean into God and say, okay, God, it's your kingdom. What's my part in helping you bring that kingdom about on earth? So I hope you are willing to come on this journey with me. Maybe you can start by reading those verses in Matthew and start to ask God to help you to understand what those verses are, because they're quite countercultural. And as I said, God kingdoms to me seems quite upside down and inside out compared to our culture today, and also compared to the culture that we see or have a little bit of a glimpse of in the Bible, and when the Beatitudes were being taught originally in the Bible. Mā te wā.